have the PowerPoint in your custody by now. Those of you who are following, you will also be able to follow it on the screen. But in case you are not able to, you have it in your hands. I am trying to ensure that I don't talk like a lawyer. If I talk like a lawyer, my younger friends from the sciences, from the arts, will start cursing me. And therefore, the lawyer friends here gathered, those who have completed their course in law, those who are practicing in law, I don't think I will be able to provide you too much of information, but I will do the basics. And I will do the basics in a way that you will be able to not only understand, but intake the methodology to be able to handle classes when you do programs on human rights for others. Right on the screen, on my left, and to you it will be on the right, is an old gentleman to whom I would like to pay tributes before I start. And that is Mr. K.G. Kannabiran, who is a senior lawyer of the Hyderabad High Court, who's no more, but he has been my mentor. We have several mentors, but he has been my mentor in ensuring and telling me, if as a lawyer, as a human rights activist, you do not take in the knowledge of law in its full, then you will never be able to protect the rights of others. This gentleman was beaten in Madurai in the year 1982 in a procession that I had organized as the Secretary General of the Secretary of the Madurai unit of the People's Union for Civil Liberties in the year 1982. He was arrested. I ran away. I literally ran away. And had I been caught that day, I would not be here to talk to you today, because that would have been the end of my life that day. That was Mr. Tarkunde, that was the Mr. Kannabiran who got arrested along with Mr. Tarkunde, the then president of the PUCL. So these are veterans who inspire us and through whom and whose input to us, as I said in the morning, with people like Ravi, people like Maya Darwala, that we are able to continue our engagement in human rights. Now, I'm trying to do something which I've never done in the past, of sharing the screen. Yes. So this session is on the definition of human rights. And I'm going to concentrate myself not on history, but I'm going to concentrate myself on definition. And for all lecturers, please keep awake. It is very difficult for lecturers to keep awake. It's very easy for lecturers to speak, but very difficult for lecturers to keep awake. And I have no system here to find out who's not keeping awake. This definition under section 2D of what is known as the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1990, for the first time, which defined what human rights was. We will be coming back to this law at later points of time in the program, but as of now, we will refer to section 2D, which is the definition section. And section 2D says, human rights means the rights relating to 4 items: life, liberty, equality, and dignity of the individual. Life, liberty, equality, and dignity of the individual. Guaranteed by the Constitution, or, so guaranteed in the Indian Constitution, or embodied in the international covenants and enforceable by courts in India. So this is a life, liberty, equality, and dignity, one guaranteed by the Constitution of India, or life, liberty, equality, dignity as embodied in the international covenants. We will come to that later. And enforceable by courts in India. This is the definition. Now let's see what this definition is when breaking it up. The rights concerned are life, the rights concerned are equality, the rights concerned are liberty, and the rights concerned are dignity. These are the four rights guaranteed in the Constitution. The Constitution that we gave to ourselves in the year 1950. But the Constitution that we gave unto ourselves in the year 1950, my dear friends, has changed over years. It is not the same Constitution I carry. I have a copy of the Constitution here, but the Constitution of 1950 and the Constitution that we hold today are different. This Constitution in my hand is different from the Constitution of 1950. Today, we have a Constitution with a number of amendments. Those articles in the Constitution have been strengthened, and the strengthening of the Constitution and the content in the articles has taken place through a variety of judgments that the Supreme Court of India has aspects of the Constitution. So when we look at this definition, it is rights to life, equality, liberty, and dignity as guaranteed under the Indian Constitution as it exists today, with all the amendments that have taken place, and in addition, with all the additions and changes that have come about as the result of the various judgments of the Supreme Court of India, and or embodied in the international covenants. And which are these international covenants? The international covenants referred here in the definition are the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Socio-Economic Cultural Rights. So these two, which are short form known as ICCPR and ICSCR, those rights of right to life, equality, liberty, and dignity, embodied in that ICCPR and ICSCR, which are enforceable in the courts of India. So our human rights is not about something which is not enforceable in the courts of India. We are talking about a right to life. We are talking about a right to equality. We are talking about a right to liberty. We are talking about a right to dignity, which is enforceable in the courts of India. My dear friends, you will see the energy I spend on this. And the energy I spend on this is if this is not into your system. For those who are going to be teachers of human rights, if this is not into your system, then you will never be able to convince the students about human rights. You have to believe in this. You have to bring it down, and that down will be able to pass it on to the others. So today, we are in short going to deal with what is this right to liberty and what is this right to dignity. For this session, because I'm going to have two sessions, for this session today till 5:30 is going to be on right to life and right to liberty. These are the two rights. And then tomorrow, we will start with right to equality and then finish with right to dignity. Now, before getting into a little bit of what right to life is, it is important to know what the soul of the Constitution says. And the soul of our Constitution is the preamble to the Constitution. Friends, we were all in protests in the month of January, February, March. But one of the best protests I enjoyed was on the 26th of January, or I think it was on the 30th of January, when we stood before outside the gates of the Madurai bench of the Madras High Court, because we were not allowed to stand inside the Madurai bench of the Madras High Court, because there are a a security cordon thrown off there, and immediately the CISF would come and throw us up, and I would have an added criminal case against me. So we had to go and place ourselves at the entrance, on the road, on the side. And what we did was something very interesting. We all read the preamble aloud. All lawyers, some of them senior lawyers, not senior by age alone, senior by designation in the High Court. All of us standing with the Constitution, opening the Constitution to the preamble, reading the preamble loud as we would have done in a classroom. And as we were doing so, a lawyer friend next to me said, and he said it in beautiful Tamil, he said, இது வரைக்கும் நாங்க படிச்சதே கிடையாதுயா. லா காலேஜில் பிரியாம்பிள் படிக்கல, கோர்ட்ல பிரியாம்பிள் படிக்கல, ரோட்ல பிரியாம்பிள் வாசிக்கிறோம். We never read the preamble in the classroom. We never had a reason to read the preamble in the courtroom. But today we are forced to read the preamble on the road, and we read it. And the more we read it on 30th of January, the more we were proud of the preamble of the Constitution. And therefore, if we need to understand the rights that are coming, which are basically enshrined in our Constitution, then it is important to know what the Constitution's preamble says. I will unfortunately have to go a little fast here, otherwise I will be thrown off. And the Constitution talks about we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. I repeat, sovereign, we are independent. Nobody can interfere with us. Socialist, we have a sense of equality and equity that the Constitution is going to represent. Secular, and we've not only taken in, but we have been able to criticize the government, which is tendencies are not secular. Democratic, not only through elections, but through participation of various forms, and we are a republic. This is something which is quite important. This is what the preamble says. And to security all its citizens, 4 things. Justice. And this justice has to be social. This justice has to be economic. This justice has to be political. Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. My dear friends, I stop here. I come to equality. Carefully read. Equality of status and opportunity. It is an equality of status and opportunity. And when we do right equality tomorrow, I will come back and say we are speaking about a right equality which we have already brought into the preamble of the Constitution. Fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. Now, this is our preamble. And it's important to know that it is this spirit of the preamble that permeates completely in the Constitution, 2017 and 18. And I would love you to read it in the confines of your house, but I would only quote one aspect of the judgment of 2017 in the case of Puttasamy. This is the right to privacy case. And you will find that you will have a quote that I will read out here, the last part, and that's important for all of us. Democracy, while talking about the preamble, the Supreme Court's bench says, democracy accepts differences of perception, acknowledges divergence in ways of life, and respects dissent. Can we all read it together once more? Democracy accepts differences of perception. My EPS and OPS can perceive matters differently. Democracy allows that, but also allows that Henri Tiphagne can have differences of perception as well. It acknowledges divergences in ways of life and respects dissent. And I just want to narrate a small story of one Andrew Sam, who was running a Facebook enterprise called Simplicity in the city of Coimbatore. I don't know whether we have any participants from Coimbatore. This young man, together with his passionate wife, who also spoke to me very recently, the husband was arrested because in his Facebook postings, he had criticized something that took place during the corona in Coimbatore. On other days in his post, go to Facebook and see simplicity. It is just simplicity. S-I-M-P-L-I, capital C-I-T-Y, simplicity. This man was arrested. This man was remanded. And this judgment of the Supreme Court that says democracy respects dissent was thrown to the wind. But as human rights people, we have now taken action before the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention for the protection of Sam Andrew. We have taken action before the State Human Rights Commission, and we have assured him that we are going to raise a contempt proceedings against the inspector who presented him for remand and the magistrate, the judicial magistrate number 2, Coimbatore, for having accepted the remand. She will be also initiated with disciplinary proceedings. Now, that is the understanding that the preamble today has through judgments of the High Court on the preamble. You have another judgment, which I will not read through, which also speaks on the preamble. Now, having said that, let us go into two understandings. Our Constitution has what we call fundamental rights, which all of you have heard of sometimes. You've got two parts in the Constitution. Part 3, which speaks about fundamental rights, directive principles of state policy. These are two aspects of our Constitution, very important aspects. Fundamental rights, very important because they are fundamental, and any violation of these fundamental rights allows us a remedy to go back into court and fight and get back that fundamental right. But we have to ensure that it is a fundamental right. The directive principles of state policy is something which is the establishment of a policy that is to be taken into account by any government which is developing its policy. Whenever it develops its policy, it makes sure that it is in tune with the directive principles of state policy. Our Constitution, in its journey from 1950 till today, has assured us over the years, from 1950 till today, it has gradually read, follow me very carefully, gradually read several of the directive principles into fundamental rights. I know we have over 100 students here, or at least 90 students here. Most of you are not married. I don't know how many of you are interested in making love. Do engage in making love, because there's nothing like a marriage which comes out of a love which is a process of several years. Some of you may be wanting to imagine this man is already dreaming. I'm not dreaming. I'm thinking about my own marriage of 40 years, which was preceded by 4 years of love making. And if you don't have the courage to make love, don't come into human rights. Human rights is about love. Human rights is about loving people. And if you can't love a person, how can you love people? So have the courage to love. Have the boldness to love. And it is only when you are able to have that, many lecturers here are angry with me because they said, oh, that opportunity to fall in love is all over, sir. Chapter closed for you, but not for the youngsters who are participating here. But the Supreme Court every day is engaged in ensuring that the lovemaking between fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy takes place when it judges cases, when it sits over cases. And in the process of its journey, several directive principles of state policy are pushed into fundamental rights. And after that, it is no longer directive principle, but it becomes a part of the baggage of fundamental rights. So from 1950 till today, many of our fundamental rights, many of our directive principles of state policy have become fundamental rights. You will appreciate that. So that is what is important to note. Don't forget this is important. And what is the difference between fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy? I mentioned that. And what is important is this article of the Constitution, 141, where law declared by the Supreme Court. Friends and comrades, follow. Law declared by the Supreme Court through its various judgments to be binding on all courts. To be binding on all courts. The law declared by the Supreme Court shall be binding on all courts within the territory of India. So if the law says, if the Supreme Court says something today in terms of right to life, that becomes binding on all of us across the territory of India. And therefore, judgments of the Supreme Court on fundamental rights actually expand the whole scope of fundamental rights that we are engaging in today. Having said that, therefore, the right to life as embodied in the Constitution is what the definition said. What did the definition say some time back? The definition read, human rights relating to life guaranteed under the Indian Constitution. Guaranteed under the Indian Constitution. So the guaranteed under the Indian Constitution today means the right to life has expanded over the years. And the right to life has expanded to include the life to live with human dignity. Friends, it's going to be a big list. Right to basic necessities of life. Right to life includes the right to privacy. It includes the right to shelter. It includes the right to access the road. It includes the right to tradition, culture, and heritage. It includes the right to livelihood, the right to food, clothing, and shelter, the right to free legal aid, the right to speedy trial. Sorry for the spelling there. Right to know, that is the right to information, the right against delayed execution of death sentence, the right to person not to be subjected to forced or bonded labor, the right to health and medical aid, and the right of women, violence against women being a violation of the right to life of women, the right to a healthy environment, the right to education, the right to decent burial, the right to food, the right to privacy. All these are parts of right to life. So all these were brought into various judgments of the Supreme Court. In every judgment, the right to health was brought in. In another judgment, the right to health was brought in. In another judgment, the right to health, the right to not to be tortured was brought in. In another, the right to water was brought in. The right to environment was brought in. All these rights were brought in by the Supreme Court, reading portions of the directive principles of state policy into the fundamental rights and providing each of these rights, which were in the directive principles of state policy, a new status. And the new status is the status of a fundamental right. Therefore, today, right to health is part of right to life and therefore a human right. A right to education is part of right to life and therefore a human right. Right to health is part of human right, a right to life and therefore a human right. Right not to be tortured is a part of right to life and therefore a human right. The right to travel is a part of right to life and therefore a human right. The right to information is a part of the right to life and therefore human rights. You can go on like this. Over the years from 1950 till today, many rights which we have listed here are parts of right to life today and therefore a human right today. So what does it mean? It means the homeless people we see on the streets with no shelter is a violation of human right because it's a violation of right to life. The situation we see of migrants across the country who went hungry without food is a situation where they are denied the right to food, which is the denial of the right to life and therefore a denial of human right. Every day in the early days of the lockdown, whether it was Assam, whether it was Jammu, whether it was Rajasthan, whether it was Maharashtra, whether it was Pondicherry, whether it was Karnataka, we saw policemen beating citizens. That amounted to torture. Every case of torture that you and I see and act, and I say it louder, act, as if you and I did not see, are violations of the right to life, and therefore violations of human right. So all these are part of right to life. Very, very important. And you can go later and you will see how these are. And I will just take you through one judgment. The list, the judgment, the citations, words are very important. The Supreme Court declared that the right to life guaranteed in Article 21 cannot be restricted to mere animal existence or physical survival. The court said it includes, the right to life includes, the right to life includes the right to live with human dignity and all that goes along with it. Namely, the right to bare necessities of life, such as adequate nutrition, adequate clothing, adequate shelter over the head, facilities for reading, and this was in a case of custody. So facilities for reading, writing, and expressing oneself in diverse forms, freely moving about and mixing in and with other fellow human beings in the jail. Now this is right to life. Supreme Court has categorically said it in a judgment. These are the judgments that courts have to follow and ensure that they are followed. The right to life does not merely connote animal existence or a continued drudgery through life. The expression life has a wider meaning, the Supreme Court has said. And that wider meaning is what we saw in this entire section. And friends, I will only take you to 2 more slides and then take a break, which is on the right road. We have got some citations here. The right to good health, we have got citations here. The right to medical aid. The right to medical aid means no doctor can throw you down. You go to a doctor, and I see there are 2 doctors, to my knowledge, and I'm sure there are more here. Every doctor has a basic duty to ensure the right to medical aid is followed. And if you don't do it, that is a violation of right to life. And what is that? Immediately attend to you. Not say, because you cannot pay me the fees, I will turn you down. No, give him treatment and then refer him to a government hospital. But first aid, medical aid is a must. And that is the judgment which is there. Right to legal aid. Nobody in this country can be tried before a criminal court if she or he does not have a free legal aid through a lawyer appointed by the state and appointed by the court and paid by the state to defend him. The right to legal aid is part of right to life. Part of right to life. And this is applicable to all women in the country. Right to legal aid is applicable to all members of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Right to legal aid is to be made available to all children, is to be made available to all organized or unorganized or migrant labor. And I can go on like this. To all members of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe community. All these are people who are entitled, in addition to other conditions, free legal aid in this country. So that is our powerful right to life. Since there are over 60% women in this audience, every case of a violence against a woman, whether it's a child, whether it's a school-going child, whether it is a college-going young woman, whether it's a married woman, at any stage of life, any form of violence that takes place against a woman is a violation of the right to life of women. Friends, let us not use other words, other terminologies that we are accustomed to. Let us start using that our right to life has been violated, and right to life encompasses livelihood. The corona, which took away the right to livelihood, has therefore denied all of us not only the right to livelihood, but therefore the right to life. The corona has ensured that the state has committed, because of its negligence in various forms, thereafter committed a violation of human right. Friends, I will stop here at this stage. I have promised my good friend Matthew that I will take a few questions. The only condition is that they should relate to what I have spoken and not relate to anything under the air. And if such questions come, I will not answer them, because this is a training program and I'm a strict trainer. I will commit myself only to questions on the matter that I have spoken. To questions, please.
Thank you, Henry. Just one question so far. And the question comes from 128 from Delhi, Priyanka. And she asks why the constitution is different from the 1950s constitution. I repeat, why is today's constitution different from the first draft of the constitution?
This is the reason why you should always ask questions. Because sometimes maybe as speakers, we use words in a hurry. And as I told you, I'm sitting trembling before all of you because I don't see any of you. And therefore, my first experience. So there are mistakes that I can make.
One more question.
Yes.
Please clarify more on fundamental rights and directives of state policy.
Yeah. Well, let's take the first question first. What is the constitution that was in 1950, and what is the constitution that we have today? And I'll give you a good example. And I will go back in my slide, and I thank this friend who was raised question. And I will go back to this right to education. Are you able to see this? This is part of right to life. This right to education was always a part of directive principles of state policy. So the second question comes here. This was a directive principle of state policy. If you look into our constitution, you will find it in the directive principles of state policy. So that I don't, I gain time. My very good friend and colleague, Mr. Rajavel, from sitting in Salem. Can you trace directive principle of state policy on right to education?
Yeah, I'll do it.
And just put it on the screen or on chat. Now, right to education was in the directive principle of state policy. Now, what happened to this right to education? This right to education got moved in the year 1994 through a judgment of the Supreme Court to be read with the right to life. This was the marriage. This was the marriage. The marriage between right to education and the right to life. And therefore, right to education entered the family of right to life through this marriage. We enter into different families due marriage, no? So a directive principle of state policy entered the family of right to life and then got the status, not as backward class or most backward class, but got a status as a fundamental right. Directive principle of state policy, right to education, now became a fundamental right to education. And once it became a fundamental right to education, then you saw what happened in the country. The teachers who had never bothered about their students, whether they were playing kabaddi outside their classroom about 15 years ago, then started looking for these children who were playing kabaddi or were on the top of the tree, jumping into a open well, and said, please come into the classroom. Why was this teacher very interested in bringing him to the classroom? Because the right to education had now become a fundamental right. And if the state did not bring all children who were outside classroom into the classroom, the state was responsible because the right to life of that particular child was being violated, and the state is responsible for that violation. And today, that article, that right to education has been incorporated into the Constitution as Article 21A. We have a new provision, 21A. The amendment brought in Article 21A, and 21A reads, the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years in such manner as the state by law determine. This is what 21A, please make a note so that you can go back and read 21A. And because it has become a part of right to life, and later, because 21A came independently, we then had the Right to Education Act of 2009. That was brought in the year 2009. And now it is right to compulsory education, free and compulsory education, education that we have as a result of which all children are supposed to be in school. So this partly answers how several rights which were not there in the Constitution in 1950 are now there in the Constitution. Similarly, there might not be amendments made to the Constitution, but through these judgments of the Constitution, of the Supreme Court, which I have cited here, but I have no time to go into them because of the time constraint, and I would like you to go through the slides very carefully, you will see that every judgment amplifies, expands the scope of right to life. And that is a change that is brought about in the Constitution. Okay, I think are there any more questions?
Yes, there are a lot of questions have come suddenly. Should I read them out here?
Please read. Please read.
I'll just go ahead, but I was just copying them. First question is, do only fundamental rights come under ambit of human rights? Do only fundamental rights?
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Ambit of human rights. A related question is, why all fundamental rights are human rights, but all human rights are not fundamental rights?
Right.
Then another similar question, don't we have human rights in fundamental rights?
Yeah.
Yeah, and other topics what people have asked are, the Supreme Court is supposed to adhere to the Constitution. Who ensures that the Supreme Court follows the Constitution?
Yeah.
According to the Constitution, why is the government not giving free of cost education everywhere till now?
Okay, let me take a break here. Wonderful questions. That means the audience is very, very alive. Challenging questions. Now, I have to carefully ensure that I don't get into a legal argument. We are in a definitional phrase of what human rights are. And my definition of human rights in my country, unfortunately reads, and I go back so that it is easy. Human rights means rights relating to life, liberty, equality, and dignity, as guaranteed by the Constitution or embodied in the international covenants. I don't understand how all these scribblings are coming, but people otherwise may understand how these scribblings are coming. I don't know.
Rajwell, can you just tell him how to disable annotation?
Is it better now? Yeah. I thought I did it myself. Okay. We keep learning every day. So human rights means life, liberty, equality, dignity as guaranteed by the Constitution. Now in the Constitution of India, right to life, liberty, equality, and dignity come in the fundamental rights part of our Constitution. So the terminology fundamental rights are in relation to the Constitution and our courts. And in terms of human rights has a larger understanding. Life, liberty, equality, and dignity remain there, and also is defined similarly in the international covenants. Now, courts have a duty to uphold these rights. And sometimes they uphold, sometimes they don't uphold. And it is very sad when they don't do that. There are a number of violations of orders of the Constitution that we see happening in court through judgments. If it was a lower court, we would be able to go to a higher court. When it's a higher court, we are not able to. And that is where the public opinion matters. And when there is a large public opinion, then they listen. And you saw, we had a retirement of a judge that took place a few days ago, Justice Deepak Gupta. And during his retirement farewell function in the Supreme Court, which for the first time in the history of the Supreme Court was online, he spoke his heart out. And spoke his heart out, particularly saying that he was shocked that the court was standing most of the time for the causes of the rich, and the causes of the poor never found its way into the court, the corridors, and into the courts of the Supreme Court. Whereas the rich could always get their cases listed, the poor could never get their cases listed. And that is the truth and nothing but the truth. But it is Justice Deepak Gupta speaking. And so judges with a certain level of morality speaking aloud can bring pressure on the court. And you and I emphasizing and re-emphasizing and collectively re-emphasizing our rights. And I use the word emphasizing. Morning somebody said protest. Yesterday somebody used the word engage. All mean the same. And if we do it publicly, and if we do it in public through what are known as protests, then you will see that the judges in the Supreme Court will also have to listen. Immediately my college lecturers will say, but what is this you're talking about protest? What is this you're talking about? Why? You are able to send on WhatsApp 102 messages. Why can't you take on WhatsApp a small protest which upholds the dignity of women, which condemns the violence against women that takes place in the city that you live in? Have a small protest in your college, take a video of the same and send it to the government authorities. That is also protest. But we have always thought protests has to take place on the street. Today, protests can be in your lunch pavilion. As students are having lunch, you can have a protest, take a video, and what 2,000 students in your college will see, 2 million students outside will see. And this is how public opinion is formed. This is how we would be able to take charge of some judges of the Supreme Court who need to be tuned in. So these two questions were attempted to be answered straight. I will now, because of time, move ahead. Matthew, with your permission?
Yes, please. Yes.
I left you all in the definition of right to life. And as I always say, so much time is given. Before I had to dispel the facilitators here and said, usually in a training program, if I cross that 5 minutes, I will try to not look at the coordinator and look somewhere else, and still I will be given another 5 minutes. But in a program like this, if I cross my time limit, you will switch off and go home. And perhaps as you're going home, you will say, without your mic being off, you might even say, activities. So I will have to ensure that I finish my subject on time today. So right to life is covered. So right to life is a very serious right that we have. There's one part of right to life which I did not cover. Yeah, this is the last part. The right to life includes matters relating to arrest. And the right to life abolishes torture. Every case of torture that takes place either on the street or in the, say it louder, in the classroom, not only in schools, but also in colleges. Torture can take place. The torture is not only physical violence, torture includes psychological violence, mental violence. And all of you know that it happens. And it happens in various forms in the classrooms of our schools, colleges, and universities. So torture on the street, torture in our schools, colleges, universities, and torture in our bedrooms. All these are violations of right to life. And I repeat, the torture that takes place in the bedroom, where the wife is tortured, whether taskmark is open or not, the torture in the bedroom continues. That is a violation of right to life. Friends, you will be wondering, why is he insisting so much on this right to life? Because so far our understanding of human rights was that this relates to violations by the police. Somewhere there, some policeman beats, that is a violation of human right. The violation of right to education is not a violation. Sorry, the violation of a right to education. Violation of right to health. The violation of right to health by Dr. Vijay Bhaskar in Tamil Nadu, or the Secretary Sheila Bila Rajesh, amounts to a violation of human right in this country because it's a part of right to life. This is the thinking that has to go in our minds. Whenever you read a newspaper now, as you read the newspaper, if it is a violation of right to health, is it a violation of right to housing where people are evicted? Is it a violation of the right to environment? Like in Sterlite, the people were protesting in the city of Thoothukudi, in the district of Thoothukudi, against a corporate company because they were only asking for free, unpolluted air and water. This is what they were asking for. And what they got in return were bullets. That was a violation of the right to environment. And the violation of the right to environment is a violation of the right to life. Violation of right to health is a violation of right to life. And that is why when there is chikungunya, now the collector comes to the village. Is the collector a great health expert? The collector comes because right to health is part of right to life. And if the collector comes, it is because a violation of right to life, the state becomes responsible because it is a fundamental right. And the state has to answer. And the collector, though he is a zero in medicine, is responding. EPS may be zero, but he has to respond because he's the state. And the state is responsible for every violation of right to life. We will bring this to an end and move to right to liberty. Right to liberty is something that is known to all of us. But before going into right to liberty, I just wanted to also do this right to information. Right to information is also part of right to liberty and right to life. You are going to have a whole morning on right to information. Friends, for those of you who are trying to rest, no problem, but listen to this. In the year 1975, this marriage took place. The Right to Information Act came in 2005. We don't have a word in the Constitution anywhere on right to information. Right to information is not used here. It was not even in the directive principles of state. It was not even in the directive principles of state policy. But the Supreme Court in the year 1970, Narayanan read, and I read out portions of the judgment. Please follow me. In a government of responsibility like ours, where all the agents of the public must be responsible for their conduct, there can be but few secrets. My collector in Madurai has to be told, there can be but few secrets. The people of this country, Mr. Collector, the people of this country, Mr. Chief Secretary, the people of this country, Mr. Director General of Police, have a right to know every public act repeat every public act. And if you're, don't forget the Supreme Court has said, the people of this country have a right to know every public act. Everything that is done in a public way by their public functionaries. See how powerful the words are. This was Justice Matthew, if I remember, he was one Justice Matthew. The people of this country have a right to know every public act, everything that is done in a public way by their public functionaries. So all those who are public functionaries, there is no for you. If you are doing something public, everything that is, people have a right, entitled to know the particulars of every public transaction in all its bearing. So if there is a public transaction, my dear, we need to know how much money was spent. And if you say there was a rapid test kit that was bought, my dear EPS, my dear OPS, or my dear Vijay Bhaskar, by the government of Tamil Nadu, if the people are entitled to know the particulars of every public transaction, it includes the financial transaction. Their right to know, that is the people's right to know, which is derived from the concept of freedom of speech, though not absolute, is a factor which should make one wary when secrecy is claimed for transactions which can at any rate have no repercussion on public security. My dear friends, for sake of time, I say, therefore, right to information is part of right to life. Right to information is part of right to life. That is all story here. Agricultural lands are having 3 times cultivation because factories were supposed to come there. And the people said, no, we want to know what these factories are. What are these, the effluent from the factories? Where are they going? The government said, no, the factories that will be established here, the effluent will be all going, and these were leather factories. They were all going into the sea. So the fishermen got up and they said, Arey, farmers can protest, but we have to protest now because that effluent will affect our fish. So the farmers and the fishermen got together and went up to a collector. This collector was a little different. This collector was not like the usual collectors. This collector was like this gentleman who happened to be the collector of Madurai some years ago, whose name I don't want to mention because other collectors might get upset. And this collector who had a spinal cord, many of these people do a surgery when they lose their spinal cord the moment they pass IAS. So this collector still had that spinal cord. And he said, told the Tahsildar responsible for land acquisition, wait, people are asking me for an information. Friends, follow my language. Farmers are asking me for information. Fishermen are asking me for information. I need to provide them information before I take the land that belongs to them. Because that land, if I take that land, their livelihood will be affected. And if their livelihood is affected, their right to life will be affected. If their livelihood is affected, their right to life will be affected. So I need to provide them information so that they can protect their right to life. This is what the collector did not use the words I used. The collector did that. And the collector had a meeting. He brought experts from the Central Institute of Leather Research in Chennai, and they all sat on the collectorate's hall. And the collector was amazed because he had asked only 250 representatives to come. Now, we activists had played a role there. We ensured that that same token, we had Xerox of that token and given to more villages. So we had almost 700 to 800 people who entered. The collector was a little surprised. He knew what had happened. He also knew perhaps who had done this. But then people said, don't worry, collector, we don't want chairs, we'll sit on the floor. And then as usual, our suit-booted fellow started getting up and saying, I want to tell you. People said, please sit down. We know enough. People have educated us enough. We have a series of 10 questions. Please answer us. So the collector said, people are fine. People will ask questions and the experts will answer. This was a collector in Tamil Nadu, in Kadalur. I'm not mentioning his name, but The way I say it, people will be able to understand who he is. And therefore, they asked the questions. There was no answer. And because there was no answer, the collector decided, since information sought by the farmers and fishermen are not being provided, the land which is to be acquired, which is to provide them livelihood, will not be acquired, and therefore, without right to information, their right to life will not be affected. Friends, the farmers did not go to court. The farmers did not have to file a writ petition. The farmers did not have to engage senior lawyers in court to argue their cases. The farmers did not have to wait with their hearts beating to look for the day when the judgment will be delivered, and then praise perhaps judge or curse the judge who delivers the judgment if it goes against you or come in your favor. Without going to court, the collector held that the right to information that the farmers and fishermen were asking is connected to their right to life. And their right to information has to be provided for their right to life to be protected. So right to information is also part of right to life. Now we'll go to right to liberty, and this right to liberty is something which is known to all of you. It includes a variety of rights. It includes the right to speedy trial. Right to liberty includes a speedy trial in court. Many of us have cases in courts which are pending for years, sometimes for decades, and sometimes or very often the person concerned in the trial is still in jail. The right to liberty includes the right to speedy trial, the right to legal aid, the right to privacy, the right against solitary confinement, the right against bar fitters, the right against handcuffing. Handcuffing. I remember as a lawyer in the Madurai Law College, as a law student in the Madurai Law College, I came across this right against handcuffing judgment of the Supreme Court delivered by late Justice Krishna Iyer, whose life has impressed many of us. We have been very, very close to him during his post-retirement life. And this right against handcuffing was in a judgment delivered by him. So I read the judgment and I went back. I said, every day in court we are seeing people with handcuffs, people with leading chains. How is this possible? So that particular day when I went, and I make it short because of time, I saw these people being taken in a van with a posse of policemen. They were all called in courts somebody. They were political prisoners and they were raising slogans, but they were all in chains. It was like dogs being taken. And I said, this cannot happen. Friends, as young as you are sitting in your social sciences classes or your history classes or your English classes or your law classes or your medicine classes, if in these classes you and I don't learn to protest, if we don't get angry at seeing injustice, you can never, never hope that society will change. You have to feel it. You have to be angry. You have to express your anger in a manner that is doable. So I immediately got hold of a photographer the next day. The photographer is still alive. He's also as tall as me. He lives here. He's got a wonderful break. I've got a note from Delhi saying that there are lots of questions. So they want to go fast, and definitely coming back to questions, Mr. Matthew. And then the next day, I went with this photographer, and I told the photographer, just take a photograph of these people coming out with their leading chains. He did take a photograph, and the reel was removed, and he got scared and he ran away. I went back to him. He was from Arasaradi, a gentleman called Charles, who then used to later work. His father used to work in the Madurai YMCA those days, and as a photographer. So I went back to him in the evening and I said, please come tomorrow. He said, sir, and I said, no, sir, I won't come. My camera will be in danger. I had pleaded with him and brought him. The next day I said, You take the photograph and you come running. Both of us will go inside the court and sit. I'm a law student. So we took the photograph again the second day. I said the court of the additional district judge, Ramnad, just Mr. Krishnamurthy was no more. And then we sat there. And then these people came and then we provided proof. The very same day, the fetters were removed. So that is what the Supreme Court said, right against handcuffing. Friends, we have to link events with these rights. These rights are not for law exams. These rights are not for PhDs. I don't have a post-graduation in law. I don't have a MPhil in law. I don't have a PhD in law. But all this, totally victims of human rights violations have taught me. They are my teachers. They are my gurus. They are the people who allowed me to permeate into their lives and ensure that all this was done. So right against handcuffing is important. That is part of right to liberty. Right against custodial violence. Right against freedom of speech and expression. I gave you an example of simplicity already. Right to receive information. Right, freedom of the press. Right to participate in picketing or demonstrations. Telephone tapping. Right to peaceful assembly. Right to form associations or unions. Right to freedom of movement. Right to reside and settle in any part of the country, etc., etc. All these are part and parcel of our right to liberty. And the right to liberty also includes right against exploitation. The right of a citizen not to be compelled to work for less than minimum wages. Wherever somebody is paid less than minimum wages, the Supreme Court has held paying a person less than minimum wages is converting that person into forced labor. Because you're forcing that person to accept a wage which is less than the minimum wage. I hope you understand. And forced labor is the case of bonded labor. If only there was a minimum wage fixed for every college lecturer, I can bet we will have bonded laborers in every college, legal bonded laborers in every college, because colleges pay their non-UGC scale people, excepting some colleges, and I know there are some colleges here which fall into that category, but others pay their lecturers 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000. If you pay them, if you had a minimum wage, you said a lecturer in a college has to be paid a minimum wage of 750 rupees a day, then you will find that most of our college lecturers are forced labor, and because they are forced labor, they are bonded laborers. That is what the Supreme Court has said. This is not my story. Right against the exploitation of children, freedom of religion and conscience, freedom to practice religion, manage religious affairs, all these which are here are rights, liberty. So whenever right to liberty is affected, that right to liberty is a violation of right to life, and therefore of right to liberty, and therefore a violation of right to human right. Whenever rights to health, education, shelter, privacy, not to be tortured, etc. are violated, right to life is affected, and right to life is affected, human rights is affected. So I promise that I will stop here with right to life and liberty today. But don't forget, the basket is full. And whenever you open your newspapers, every violation, mentally you should be able to say whether it's a violation of right to life or a violation of liberty, or both life and liberty. Because they are violations of right to life and liberty, they are human rights violations. You will see the number of events that take place are events which indicate violation of human rights. I will stop here and ensure that I take questions.
Yes, thank you, Henri. Lot of questions. I had a very difficult time.
Sorry.
But to summarize and bring forward the most relevant ones, here are a few. So a lot of participants asked with regard to two important issues, what you have mentioned in your lecture. One is they want to know a bit more about the directive principles of the state policy. They said if you can give some examples, they were not able to follow fully what you had said. Then a lot of people ask the difference between fundamental rights and human rights. What they want to know, what I could grasp is, and one of them wrote also, are all human rights fundamental rights?
I can't hear you. I can't
Are
hear you.
all human rights fundamental rights? Then, which constitution is applicable today? The new constitution or the original constitution? Two people asked this specific question. And is it only the Supreme Court of India which can amend the constitution? This was a question asked. How is constitution amended? Now, I will not go in details.
Your third question. Your third question, please.
With regard to amendment of the constitution?
Before that, you said something?
Yeah, which constitution is applicable? Is it the new constitution or the old constitution? The amended constitution or the original constitution, first draft of the constitution, adopted constitution?
Okay.
Should I tell you about other questions?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
I'm taking down, so there's no problem.
Okay. Then Shrutika asks, how can the state ensure balance between fundamental rights and the restrictions? Because as Ravi said in the morning, as you also mentioned about fundamental rights, but they come with restrictions. What is the balance? So a very interesting question, and I think if you can explain more with other examples also, where do transgender rights come under the constitutional provisions? Then there were a lot of comments with regard to the current lockdown, the Vizag gas lake, your example with regard to opening of Tasmac shops in Tamil Nadu. But a question with relevance which I found over there, how does right to livelihood is violated given it's a pandemic at the moment?
Okay.
And last one.
Okay.
Now, our constitution also have laws like the sedition law, which violate the fundamental rights. How do we justify their existence? And if, as you said, public influence is important for the courts, but what we have seen, the public is not unable to influence the courts. Your comments on that? I end it here. So many questions.
Making time difficult for me. 5:30, killing time. Okay. I've got exactly, I think, about 17 minutes more if I look at the clock properly. Okay. I'll be very, very careful. Friends, thank you for these questions. This is the only reassurance one has before this little equipment in front of me that at least 15, 20 of you are very, very alive by asking me all these questions, or many more. I didn't even want to get in the chat because I'll get disappointed. I'll get distracted. Now, all that I would say, and I find short answers. I will try to be a good lecturer for some time. Please go into the Constitution. In a lecture like this, we can only throw light. This was supposed to concentrate only on definition of human rights. We were not doing the Constitution. And I'm very, very scared if you are going to do the Constitution. And I can tell you there is one participant here somewhere. Her name is Suresh, Matthew, what's her name? Suresh, Nithya, no. Nidhi Suresh. Please contact Nidhi Suresh. Put it on the chat and Nidhi Suresh will identify herself. Young lady who with a few advocates in Chennai are doing a course on understanding the Constitution. And I see that number of you are interested. And in human rights, one of our greatest value is to start sharing. to start introducing others, not young. They won't beat me, but you might beat me if I say Suresh and Saila were young. Have been doing a night session from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock. Lecturers who are interested, those who are interested in fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, please contact this young lady I mentioned now, Nidhi Suresh. Please note down. And she will put you in touch with this constitution, reading the constitution, a course on reading the constitution on Wednesdays and Saturdays, which takes place from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I also attend that program because I think we always need to keep ourselves alert. And these are my good friend Suresh is the Secretary General of the People's Union for Civil Liberties, and Saila will be addressing a session on freedom of assembly on one of these days in our course. So, Directive Principles of State Policy, read at part 4 of the Constitution. Take a copy of the Constitution or just Google Constitution. Part 3 is Fundamental Rights. Part 4 is Directive Principles of State Policy. Almost all our directive principles of state policy have now been read into fundamental rights and therefore have the status of fundamental rights, which means if our right to health is affected, it is a fundamental right because it has been read into Article 21, right to life, or right to education, as I pointed out, and various other rights which are there have all now become fundamental rights into our constitution because they are brought into fundamental rights either under right to liberty or under right to life. They are also human rights in the definition of human rights that we have got in our country. So read part 4. That is the first question. The second question is the whole question of fundamental rights and human rights. Human rights is bigger than fundamental rights. Fundamental rights is in our constitution. So in our constitution, a set of rights have been brought in, and those set of rights are considered in the Indian constitution as being fundamental rights. But if you go into another constitution, you will find that their constitution may not use a particular life to be a part of their fundamental rights. But human rights are larger, human rights are global, human rights are universal. So that is the basic difference. What is the constitution that we are talking about? Which constitution are you referring to? I'm referring to the same constitution of 1950 with all its amendments, and also with all the additions that the Supreme Court has contributed to this constitution through its judgments. Remember, this encompassing this envelope of rights which has been expanded by the Supreme Court is what I was referring to as expansion of the constitution. It is the same constitution. It is the same constitution. We hope it will be the same constitution. There is an attempt to ensure that this constitution changes. That is what we have to resist and fight. And if that fight is to succeed, this cannot be done on the street. It has to be done in our classrooms. And it has to be done in the classrooms where you teach value education. This value education is not about sitting and praying, respectful of the elderly, respectful of women, and pray for women, pray for this. The value is learn your rights and ensure that you uphold your rights and uphold the rights of others who cannot fight for their rights. So value education has to bring all this into the classroom. And the more and more you and I bring into the classroom, then that constitution will not be allowed to be changed as easily as the government is planning. Give me one human right which is not in the constitution. And I can immediately think of something, and I will use that, the right to self-determination. And we will come again to this right a little later. The right to self-determination is not part of our constitution, but it is a human right. And when you come to the international covenants, the treaties that we will be studying, you will see that 2 conventions contain the right to self-determination. But the right to self-determination is not part of our fundamental rights. So here is a human right to self-determination. Here is a human right to self-determination of the Tamil people of Sri Lanka saying we want our own sovereign state. That is a human right. You may differ in the claim, but they have a right. They have a right to ask for it. They may not get it today, but they will get it later. The people of East Timor who fought for their independence, for a sovereign state from the state of Indonesia, fought. They fought and they got it. And today East Timor is an independent state. That is a human right, which is not initially in the constitution, but you fight on the streets and then it comes into your own realm of law and then gets the stamp as Ravi Nair. I borrowed terms so that it's easier for you to understand that was brought into our law books. Shrutika's question I have noted. Fundamental rights and their restrictions. Yes, Shrutika always asks very difficult questions because she deals with difficult circumstances. She's a colleague of mine, therefore I'm referring to her. Don't worry. I hope it's the same, Shrutika. Shrutika deals with a lot of these restrictions. Because in the cases of human rights defenders that she's handling on a day-to-day basis, this young lawyer is handling all sorts of cases where, and the latest she's handling is of a lady who was arrested in the Northeast Delhi case. I think she was 15 weeks pregnant and she's in jail today. And she's fighting her case. So whenever the case of fundamental rights are raised, the restrictions are brought. It is at times like this, friends, international law will become very, very useful to us. So whenever we speak about freedom of association and assembly and the restrictions that are there in the Constitution, it is at these times that we should say, understand and see how the UN has been able to expand the same freedom of association and assembly with better standards, and then slowly bring those standards into our domestic law. And this is the way we can change. But it is easily said. Unfortunately, we don't have too many of such creative judges sitting in the courts. Let's be very honest. Let's not be very, very impolite and start saying lies in a training program. We don't have too many of those judges. You have only one judge, Deepak Gupta, who on his date of retirement can say the poor are not entering into this institution. But I asked myself when I went to sleep, Justice Gupta, I respect you. But Justice Gupta, why did you not say it when you were on the bench? If you had said it when you were on the bench, if you had said it in your full court meetings, perhaps 3 more judges would have joined you. And then we would have had more poor entering the courts. Friends, you will understand that we had this kind of a jurisprudence in this country earlier. And when we do our class on public interest litigation, you will find that we talk about such jurisprudence of the past. Having said that, I'll move to the next question on transgenders and tell them tomorrow we will deal with transgender when I look at the right to equality. I will try to start with that example of transgenders and also the example of persons with disabilities, so that when we look at what are the constitutional provisions that are being enjoyed by them, we will be able to come to those rights. This lockdown, Vizag, I'm so happy you're all reflecting on situations. So happy you're able to connect these. And that is exactly what this course is supposed to be. This course is not to give you another certificate that you can put around your neck and walk. That is not going to help us. But if you people start linking this knowledge that you've got as journalists or as lawyers, as teachers, as students, as social workers, that is a beginning that change is there to happen. A right to livelihood in the pandemic. Yes. Now the pandemic cannot withdraw your fundamental rights in this country. The pandemic cannot deny you your right to life, right to equality, right to liberty, and right to dignity. That cannot be withdrawn. So because it is pandemic, the policeman has no right to take his lathi and trying to be decent, take his lathi and beat the person on the road. Or take a lathi which is taller than himself and beat people on the road. He has no business to do that. He has no business even to impose topukarnam that we do, catching our ears and then having to sit up and I don't know what topukarnam is translated in English. He has no business because it is a matter of dignity of that woman or that man on the street. Pandemic doesn't deny us our fundamental rights. Our fundamental rights remain with us. And that is why we call it a violation. That is why we protested against it. That is why for some time we did not. Because we said people also have to behave. You have to appeal to people. But how would the people, if you are given time, colleges would have spoken. Did you ever ask the principals of colleges to communicate to their students? Never. It's the principal can communicate the matter to 3,000 students in every college. It happens. If the government wanted to be democratic, if the government wanted to be participatory, then the district collector has only that to do. When you want a procession to celebrate the centenary celebrations of Dr. MGR, then you call all the colleges and then you give them awards. For that you are able to do, but for the pandemic you are not able to use that. I'm sorry, my dear collectors. I'm sorry, my dear policemen. I'm sorry, my good chief secretary and DGPs. This is what you're supposed to do. Fundamental rights continue, and our fundamental rights will continue. Pandemic doesn't withdraw fundamental rights from us. Sedition, yes, it should be thrown out of the books, everybody says, but it is being used, continuously being used, continuously being foisted on people. We have about 175 to 200 participants here. Okay, the third of us can reach a minimum each one of us to 5,000 people. Let us start a campaign against the law of sedition in India. This is how campaigns start. This is how pressure is put, and this is how the state is forced to bring changes in the law. Public influences on courts by speaking. More and more people have to speak. It is only because people spoke, and people spoke not verbally, not orally, but sometimes with brooms in their hands, that the judgment of the task mark changed in the Madras High Court. You saw it a few days ago. I'm sorry, I'm catering to the state of Tamil Nadu here because they will understand. Our liquor shops opened. People protested. Political parties protested. Women protested. Students protested. Everybody protested. But the state wanted income. 170 crores a day. 170 crores on the first day. The third day, they went back to the court and showed that everything was not being followed. It was closed. The victory of that judgment is not by the judges. It was by those who were with their broomsticks, with their brooms in their hands. In Chellur in Madurai, for those who don't know, in Chellur in Madurai, it is they who ensured that this public opinion was created. Public opinion has to be created. Those public opinion means you should speak loud. You have to be talk on the top of your voice. You have to be loud and clear and united and be humble to join hands with others. That is what will bring in change. And this is what yesterday was spoken about by Maya, by Vasanti ma'am, this morning by Ravi, and I end the day today saying the same thing. Let us join together. This knowledge is not to give us a degree. This knowledge is not to give us an X certificate. This knowledge is to humble us more into understanding human rights more and to work with skills to fight the violations that take place where many of our people are being affected. Okay, there is a question here, and I will take it. It is an academic session. Academic sessions, questions are to be asked. Teachers, don't close questions in academic sessions. The questions may be tough, but the questions have to be asked. And there was a question, and I won't say from where the question comes because then automatically people start putting people into small categories. And the question is, what is your opinion of the right to self-determination in the state of Kashmir? If I read it that way. Friends, I will tell you, I started this class at 4 o'clock. 1:30 to 3:30. Sorry, 1:30 to 3. I was in a Zoom call or a confidential call with the Federation, International Federation on Human Rights, which is known as FIDH. Please note it down, FIDH. Google and find out what it is. It's the International Federation of Human Rights, in which People's Watch is a member. And we had several members from across Asia who are meeting to share some of our activities and what is happening, etc. And one of them was from the state of Kashmir. And he was narrating that till today, till yesterday, he did not have internet in Kashmir. My Supreme Court has not had the time to spend time on the issue of Kashmir. Do the people of Kashmir have a right to self-determination? Yes, they have a right to self-determination. That is what the international human rights regime tells us. But a lot of things which are nasty are taking place, of course. Do you promote violence? I don't promote violence. I don't promote violence. But I want to ensure that governments also start respecting people's right to self-determination. I will stop with that. I will stop with that. We will stop here for the day. We will end the day so that we are well within time. I thank you for your cooperation. We'll continue the class tomorrow at 9 o'clock, as always. 8:45 you will come. And I repeat, there is no compulsion on you. I think the clarity will come in the writing, in the written circular today by the end of the day. There is no compulsion on any of you to complete the activities that are being posted. It is your choice, a choice for everybody. Why we are giving you is because you can use those activities in your classrooms. If you do it, well and good. That is the rule. Students, other participants who complete more than 5 activities in the module successfully at a time frame which is yours, not determined by us. But before the end of module 1, we'll have a special mention that they also conducted and participated in activities in the course, in their certificate. This is the additional. Those students who need it for their academic purposes, please carry on and do 5 activities. But look at the activities, read the activities, because that is an internalizing process. I don't want to cross the time. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. And I hope I was clear, and I hope I was able to carry forward the message. Thank you very much. Good evening. All the best.